Most retirement plans do an excellent job modeling the money, and almost none of them model the time. And for CRNAs specifically, that missing piece changes everything about when stepping back actually becomes possible and what it looks like when you get there. I want to start with something that doesn't show up on any account statement. When CRNAs come in to talk about retirement, the conversation almost always starts the same way. Brett, how much money do I need? When can I stop working? And if I do, will I run out of money? Now, those are the right questions to ask, eventually. But there's a question underneath those questions that almost nobody is asking. And it's the one that actually shapes what retirement looks like on a daily basis. The question is not how much money you'll have. It's what kind of time you will have and when. Retirement is not a single uniform stretch of years. It actually unfolds in phases, and those phases feel very different from one another. So understanding where you are in those phases and where your go-go years actually sit on your personal timeline is one of the most useful things a CRNA can do before she decides when to leave. Now, this matters for a few reasons that are specific to the CRNA career path. CRNAs tend to be high earners who have spent years focused on building financial security. Now, the work is demanding, the hours, the physical and mental intensity, the early mornings, and the schedule that often leaves little room for much else. So by the time a CRNA is in her mid to late 50s, yes, she may have a meaningful nest egg by this point, and she may also feel like she's been putting life on hold for a long time. And it's the things that get deferred that are usually not abstractions. They're specific. Things like more time with kids or grandkids, maybe a different relationship with mornings, the travel that keeps getting pushed back, or a slower version of daily life that feels like it belongs to someone else right now. Financial planning at its best is about creating the conditions for those things to actually happen someday on a real timeline with a real plan behind it. And a three-phase model helps you do that by giving you a more honest picture of what the retirement years ahead of you actually look like and where your highest capacity time sits within them. The financial conversation around retirement rarely addresses that part. It addresses the numbers, but what it often misses is how the numbers interact with the timing of a life, with when you'll have the energy and the health to do the things that you have saved the money to do. And that's what we are going to talk about today. Now, there are roughly 3 phases in retirement, and they are not equal. So most financial plans spread withdrawal assumptions more or less evenly across all of them. But that's often the wrong approach, and here's why. The first phase is what is called the go-go years. Now, for most people, this runs from the early 60s to about age 70. Here, your energy is high, your health is generally good, and so you have the capacity to do almost anything that you've been putting off. Again, travel, time with family, maybe new projects, or a completely different pace of life. And research consistently shows that discretionary spending is highest in early retirement and then declines meaningfully as people move through their later phases. So this is the phase where the experiences happen. Now, the second phase is the slow go years, roughly between age 70 to 80. Here, the pace changes. Your energy shifts and health becomes more variable. So the expensive international travel becomes less frequent, and spending on experiences will naturally soften. So your life is still full, it's just different. And then the third phase is the no-go years, roughly age 80 and beyond. Here, daily life becomes more home-centered. Medical expenses naturally tend to rise, and discretionary spending on experiences drops pretty sharply. Now, this phase is worth planning for carefully, but it's usually not the phase that people are imagining when they picture what retirement will feel like day to day. So here's what this means practically for a CRNA thinking about when to leave work. The go-go years are your highest capacity window. They're when you are most able to do the things that you have imagined. And for many CRNAs, a realistic look at the timeline reveals that the actual go-go window and your working years are actually overlapping more than you'd like. Now, this is not something to feel badly about, but it's just something to plan around. Because the more clearly you can see where your go-go years sit on your personal timeline, well, then the more intentional you can be about what you do with them. And that clarity is the whole point of modeling this. Most retirement plans I review for CRNAs are built around a flat assumption. And that is roughly, again, the same spending every year through retirement adjusted for inflation. And that's a very reasonable simplification for a quick calculation, yes. But it often leads people to overestimate how much money they need in the slow go and no go years, and then underestimate how much flexibility they already have during the go-go years. When you model spending by phase, again, higher in the early years when you're active, and then lower in the later years when the pace shifts, well, the picture often changes, and sometimes it changes meaningfully. Is it worth doing that more precise model of spending? In my experience with CRNAs, yes, almost every time. Because what it reveals tends to be more encouraging than people expect. And that change matters for CRNAs who are on the edge already of deciding whether to stay or step back from work, because it can reveal flexibility that a flat model misses entirely. And there's also an identity piece worth naming here, because it rarely comes up in financial conversations. CRNAs spend years, often decades, building clinical expertise in a role that carries real weight and real meaning. So stepping back from that is not just a financial decision, it's a personal one. And it can feel like losing something important about who you are. Now, what I find working with CRNAs over time is that financial clarity tends to help with the identity piece too. Because when the money question is answered clearly, when there's an actual plan in front of you and the math is not abstract anymore, the question of what you want your life to look like becomes a lot easier to think about. So the two questions are separate from one another, actually, and running the numbers helps you take them one at a time. Let me walk you through a hypothetical scenario that reflects what I see regularly. So imagine a CRNA named Maria. She's 58 years old, she's based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and she has 1.95 million saved. Now, her income is $230,000 per year, and she has no debt. She's pretty healthy and active, and she has a version of her life that she's been looking forward to for a long time. She wants more time with her grandkids, and there's travel that she has been planning for years, and mornings that don't start at 4:30 a.m. And when I map Maria's timeline, One number becomes important right away. Her go-go phase runs from roughly now until about age 68. So that's approximately 10 years of high capacity retirement ahead of her. By understanding that timeline and what it means for when she leaves and what the plan looks like is the thing that changes her decision. The most common concern I hear from CRNAs in Maria's situation is this: Brett, I can't walk away from $230,000 a year. My portfolio can't replace that income. So that's a reasonable thing to think, but it's also based on a misunderstanding of what the plan actually needs to do. Maria doesn't need her portfolio to replace $230,000 per year. She only needs it to cover the gap between what she spends and what other income sources can provide. And so that's a much smaller number than her current salary. And more importantly, CRNAs have an income option in early retirement that most professions don't have: locum work. So Maria can retire from her full-time position and pick up 10 to 15 days per year doing locum anesthesia. At $1,300 per day, that's $13,000 to $19,000 annually. So she's not replacing her income. She's filling a specific gap during the early years of retirement, before Social Security starts and before the portfolio has had additional time to grow. So 10 to 15 days a year in exchange for the rest of it on her own terms. That is the trade-off. And for most of the CRNAs that I work with, once they actually see that number, it changes how the decision feels. Because now she stays connected to the work at a pace that she controls. She maintains her professional identity if that matters to her. And the portfolio does not have to carry the full load in the first years of retirement, which therefore gives it room to grow. So this is what I call the Locum Bridge, and it's one of the most useful tools available to CRNAs planning an early transition. The Locum Bridge is not meant to be permanent. Most of the CRNAs I work with who use it find that within the first year or two, they've actually scaled back even further or stopped working entirely. Because again, now the portfolio has grown and Social Security is closer. So it's a transitional tool that buys exactly the runway that the math needs. Now let me add the tax layer, because this is where Maria's plan gets meaningfully better. So she has 1.95 million. Most of it is in a pre-tax 403b. And I mean most of it. The majority of what she has built is sitting in an account that the IRS has a claim on. So when she retires at 58, before Social Security, before Medicare, before required minimum distributions at age 73, she enters what I call the conversion window. Here, her taxable income drops significantly. And that drop, right in the years when most people are just trying to manage expenses, actually creates an opportunity that most people don't use. Because in those gap years, Maria can move money from her pre-tax 403b into a Roth IRA at a lower tax rate than she was paying during her working years. Converting $50,000 to $70,000 per year while her income is down means that she's paying the IRS now at 12% or 22% rather than later when required minimum distributions and Social Security income stack on top of each other beginning at age 73. And the stacking is what I call the 73 collision. For a CRNA with a large pre-tax account who hasn't done conversion work during the gap years, The required minimum distributions at 73 arrive alongside Social Security income and therefore can push taxable income into a higher tax bracket than necessary. So converting during the gap years addresses that before it becomes a problem. So Maria's plan brings three pieces together. She has the Locum Bridge that covers part of the income gap in early retirement. Then she has the Roth conversion strategy, which reduces her tax exposure over the long term, and a sequenced withdrawal plan. Taxable accounts first, pre-tax second, and Roth last, which minimizes that tax bill in each year and also extends the life of the portfolio. So here's what it looks like for her over time. She retires at age 58. She pulls from her taxable brokerage account first to cover living expenses. She converts approximately $60,000 per year from her 403b into a Roth IRA during the first 5 years while her income is low. And she picks up 12 to 15 locum days per year, again, roughly $15,000 to $19,000 to supplement expenses while the portfolio grows. At age 65, she moves to Medicare. And by the time required minimum distributions start at age 73, well, now her Roth bucket is meaningfully larger, her taxable income in retirement is now lower, and her overall tax picture is significantly better than it would have been if she stayed in the OR until age 65, with that pre-tax account just continuing to grow untouched. Life just is not that linear. The plans must adjust as circumstances change, but the structure holds. So here is something concrete that you can do this week. Estimate where your go-go phase sits on your own timeline. So pick an age, 68, 70, whatever feels right based on your health and family history. And then count backwards from there to today. And that's your window. Then look at your current savings balance and ask yourself a simple question. Is the thing that's keeping me working right now genuinely financial, or is it uncertainty about whether I've modeled the right numbers? Because those are two different problems. Now, if it's financial, the math will show you what needs to change. But if it's uncertainty, the math will show you that the numbers already work and that the decision is actually yours to make. The second thing worth doing is finding out what locum work actually pays in your specialty and region right now. Again, most CRNAs I work with have not looked at this seriously, but when they do, the Locum Bridge often becomes the piece that makes the whole plan viable, not just emotionally, but mathematically. And then the third thing is to get a rough sense of your pre-tax account balance relative to your total savings. And if the majority of what you have saved is in a pre-tax account, then the conversion window matters a lot for you. So it means early retirement isn't just about income replacement. It's also about tax positioning for the decades ahead. A CRNA with $1.5 million in a pre-tax account who retires at age 58 and does nothing with the conversion window is likely to face a meaningfully higher tax bill in her 70s than she needs to. However, a CRNA with the same balance, who uses the gap years intentionally, converting a portion each year while income is low, ends up in a very different position at age 73. And the math on that difference is usually large enough to change how the whole plan feels. So I hope you can see none of these steps require a comprehensive financial plan to get started. They just require looking honestly at the actual numbers and the actual timeline rather than the assumptions that were never really examined. And that honest look is almost always more encouraging than people expect. We work with CRNAs and nurse practitioners age 45 and older with $750,000 or more saved. If you would like help modeling your own timeline, including where your go-go years sit, what the Locum Bridge might look like for you, and whether the conversion makes sense in your situation, well, please feel free to schedule a conversation with me through the link in the show notes or directly at connectwithbrett.com. It's a free pre-op retirement assessment, about 30 minutes, and it starts with your actual numbers. Take care of yourself and take care of your money.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. This podcast does not engage in rendering legal, financial, or other professional services.